Yes. All right, welcome. Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. It is Friday. It's been a long week. Welcome. My name is Jalen Vasquez. I'm the community manager and events coordinator here for Freelancers Hub. Hope everyone had a relaxful week. It's the weekend. It's time to relax. It's time to celebrate. Time to get a drink. Do whatever you need to do. Welcome to the third episode of Thou Art Pay Us with Tasha Duget and Autumn Brayon. Very happy to have these two ladies here with us to pretty much give us tips and answer your questions and just give us whatever loose change they may have on business, how to handle money, and just pretty much whatever you need to do as a creative.
Indeed. Thanks for welcoming us.
I'm talking about it. Welcome. Like Jalen said, this is another episode, actually the third episode in this run for Thou Art Pay Us. And it is titled, We Are Listening. But just to give you a little bit about Thou Art Pay Us, we come together to really explore the realities of what it's like to be Black women creatives over some cocktails and some good conversation. We do occasionally have guests, actually not occasionally, once a month, to share their stories and their anecdotes around how they've had to advocate for themselves for equitable equal pay. And today,
Who's our guest? Who's our guest for today, Tasha?
I mean, today, the audience, you all are our guests. You know, y'all have, okay, we listening. How would you describe the episode for today, Autumn?
Yeah, it's definitely a special episode because, as you said, you all are the guests. Our audience members are the guests this time. And during this episode, we're going to be answering questions that you all gave to us, but also getting some answers from you all from questions that other people posed. So we talk about loose change, hashtag loose change. And that's when somebody drops some special information that might be a tip or something that they've learned from their own experience with fighting for pay equity. We call that loose change. And we've had a lot of that building up from our past few episodes. So this episode is going to be all loose change from listeners about getting fair pay. So we put out a call asking for some of the best advice, and you all answered. So thank you all.
Thank you. So I feel like we should just jump right on into it because again, like you said, the call was answered and we got some rich information. So we'll just go right into it. Number one, how have you initiated conversation around your salary?
So I'm going to share the response that we got to that first question. So this listener says, during our annual evaluation, we determined an increase in our salary based on the performance in the client's approval evaluation on our efforts that year. In addition, I received a larger percentage increase to my salary. When I asked why this was given to me, my accountability partner said that company-wide, they wanted to make sure that positions were a little bit more competitive. So they did market-based research. They realized that they needed to be more competitive in the market. So they increased our salaries. In essence, they gave all members in my position a higher salary. What I saw was that they needed to be competitive and not lose individuals due to a high turnover rate that was occurring within our company. When I found that out, I talked to my boss the next day and I said, well, if I'm given this amount of money and it wasn't based on my effort or my work ethic, what are you going to do to not lose me? What's needed and how much more are you willing to give me? I flat out asked my employer, if I am doing this and that because of my position, then what more can be provided in terms of financial compensation for a job well done? And it got me thinking. One of the things I learned is to look at the position that you have and look at what other companies are paying for that same type of position to make sure that you're getting paid equitably. And if not, then you know, and it's a great time to look elsewhere at other companies if you can't look within your own.
I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
What is the website? Is it Glassdoor? There's actually a website where you can see the median for particular positions. And I think that that's really smart. Like some people don't even recognize that that's even out there, and it's a tool that they can use in their negotiation. What I find,
Absolutely.
and you definitely chime in with this, Autumn, what I find is difficult sometimes for creatives and those of us in the art sector is that sometimes our titles are creative within themselves, that there isn't a baseline for the actual title. Like some titles have like 10 words in one title. Glassdoor, it'll stop after the sixth one. Like, I can't help you. How do you know? So it really doesn't encompass all of the things that are associated with that position. So even in that, there is some way that you can wiggle around.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I included glassdoor.com in the chat so that you all can use that resource. Something that I really liked about this response is the kind of agency that they gave themselves just to have this conversation with their accountability partner and the agency to do research and find out why there was an increase in pay. I think that's so important.
And thank you. I think highlighting that they even had an accountability partner is also powerful, right? How many of us are like, who can I lean to? It makes me just think about just regular 9-to-5s, how there's such secrecy around pay.
Mm-hmm.
That even inquiring, I don't know if that's happened to you, where the employer will tell me, don't ask anybody or tell them how much you're getting paid. That would be the premise. And I'm just like, that already gives me some red flags. Dangerous. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what other responses did we get to that question? Just to repeat the question was, how have you initiated a conversation about your salary?
And so Rosalie Tucker literally piggybacks off of the previous listener very well. I wrote a letter documenting why I thought I needed a promotion. And then I set up a meeting directly and shared why I thought it was time. Sometimes it's really just finding that moment to do the ask. And, some people saying waiting for the right time may never present a time. Yeah. So it's just best when you feel that nudge in your gut.
Right. And I love this practice that Rosalie brings up, writing out a letter documenting why you need promotion, because I think that's as much a tool for yourself as it is for your employer, because sometimes you have to remind yourself of what you've actually done. It's so easy to talk yourself out of a promotion or a different title or a higher salary, but I think it helps objectify it when you literally put pen to paper.
I'm gonna double affirm that, and even add to that, writing what you do. Do you know how you get a job description and then you find that where it says miscellaneous, maybe some other things, it literally amounts to another job. Jalen was like, I saw you, Jalen.
No, it's very true, and I've had experience with jobs like that before.
What happened?
It was a little bit. Some of it was when I was in retail. I used to work at an art store in the city, and most of my job detail was just basic retail things like stocking shelves, bringing in deliveries, helping customers, sometimes being a register, the basics. But then there were other things of sometimes they would ask me to actually take in inventory manually when that's supposed to be our inventory manager's receiver's position, not me. It's just well, I do all this other stuff. Can I get a raise? Nope, because your title is still this. Unless you get the full promotion, you won't get a raise, or unless we do the annual raises, which is a quarter.
I feel like we should uplift the and, right?
What do you mean?
When they say and this and that, but then they talk about they don't want to pay you officially for all the work. How about we just declare the and means you just need to pay me more money? Right? Honor that there is this additional labor that gets dismissed as just the miscellaneous stuff. It's no, it warrants payment. So that's just me.
Yes, and so this is another response that we got. To initiate a conversation about pay equity, this listener says she compared coins with her two coworkers at the same time that were also women of color. And they asked in solidarity for a salary increase, it seems like. Power in numbers. I really like that.
I'm gonna adjust my phone because people are saying,
Oh, we hear you well now. This is good.
yeah, you know, sometimes these cases don't really help out. So let me just, how am I sounding now, y'all? Is this better?
It comes and goes.
Yeah.
It could be an internet connection too.
I just want to let y'all know I did pay my bill. Okay, y'all. Hopefully that this is better, but it could be the internet. Let me not even touch it because then it'll be even worse. So yes, Autumn, you were saying, you know, strength in numbers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is interesting too, because it's going back to what we said earlier about research being as easy as talking to the person that's working at the desk next to you or that you've been working with for a while. That's market research as well. That's research within your own company. I love that these women were able to band together to get a salary increase together. That's so encouraging.
And that also, one, that's a shift in work environment, right? And then that speaks to trust. You know what I mean? Recognizing that both of y'all can gain from this conversation and this action, and what does it mean to like lean into that and benefit across the board. So yes, power in numbers. Lean into your coworkers because they're literally going through the same thing.
Yeah, it's something that I always tell other freelancers as well, just because, especially if you're just starting out, you may not know how to price yourself, when to begin, and you don't want to undervalue yourself. So the best way is to have, like, to speak to other freelancers, to see what other people in your field are doing, and just to figure out whatever your starting base should be, and then increase from there. Because if everyone had the attitude of like just being uncomfortable to talk about money or whatever their rates are, then things are going to be undervalued. You're not going to know what it is you're worth. Other people aren't going to understand like what the cost is for whatever service you're providing is. So the best way to just go around is just to be open about it, be transparent about it.
Yeah.
So Jalen, you kind of hit the nail on the head, and I love that your voice was added into this conversation because the next listener stated, I've asked male colleagues what their going rate for the job is, and I base my rate off of that for big photography jobs. And that was offered by Kay Hickman. And I don't know if Kay is in the audience with us right now.
Kay is. I see Kay Hickman in here. Hey, Kay.
Hey, Kay. So, and I did get permission to uplift Kay's name, you know, honoring naming Black women in spaces, right? I just want to know, like, do you ask them for their particular going rate, or do you ask them for the going rate? Because I think there's a difference between the two around that. You are more than welcome to offer your answer.
I would generally ask them what they would personally charge at that point in time, but I would also take in consideration how much more experienced are they than I am. Because most of the people who I generally speak to are a little bit higher experience level. They've been doing it for a few more years. It's more like creative directors, or I'm trying to think of a different type of level. I don't want to say like virtuoso, but something along those lines. And I'll kind of take that into consideration. If they give me that price, that's for at the level they're at now. So I'll try to just bring that down a little bit. I don't have a specific percentage of how much I may bring that down by, but sometimes I'll ask them, like, when you're at this point in your career, how much do you charge? They'll tell me that. Sometimes if it's like a long time ago, then I may have to adjust for inflation, but that's
Okay.
Something that I also do that helped me when I first started with like creative direction and curatorial gigs, I would ask colleagues like what they were charging, what a good budget to work with is. But I also started looking at it from a different perspective and speaking to the people that created the budget to find out how much was set aside for art production, creative direction, art direction, curation, just so that I could know about what percentage of a total budget I could expect to play with.
Did y'all hear that, y'all? Okay. First of all, now you got my mind going, because I'm thinking, one, how did you get that close to those people? And especially, so as the curator, you might have access to that information, right? But as the actual artist, there is that wall that separates, you know, who knows what is entirely been allotted for that particular budget, right? But that is something to see. Well, if you have a relationship with a curator, maybe that can give you some insight around that. And I did see Kay respond that she does ask her male colleagues specifically what their going rate is. And the reason why I brought that up, because that question made me think about the film Big Eyes. It was a documentary from 2014, and I didn't know about this story until you know, we go to so many panels and so many workshops and so many things, it gets a blur. But the story stood out for me because the artist's name was Margaret Keane, and she was creating these paintings that were selling, but under her husband's name, because she felt that those pieces would sell under the name of a man. And it wasn't until later on she sued him. She was like, actually, no, this wasn't you. This was me. And she claimed that. But it just makes me think how even in this time right now, a lot of women, one, don't think that they are on the same vibe and have to do these manipulative, you know what I mean? Like do these other things instead of just like fully standing like, no, I am the artist. This is what I created. This is my value. And that is it. So, you know, to still see that some of that residual internal, this internal doubt, I think what you alluded to earlier, that your work is not comparable because of the way the sector perpetuates itself, is just really unfortunate. So I love that you offered another avenue to get some information. Yeah, great.
And thank you, Kay, for your response.
I'll also add what's also good to, when you ask for a client what their budget is, if they can't fully afford the quote that you've placed and you know what their budget is, you can somewhat rehash your services to figure out, or to let them know at that cost, what will that provide them with your services.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's such a good exercise to also create a menu of, as a creative, a menu of your offerings and what can be offered for different amounts. See, that's the thing. I've learned that absolutely everything is negotiable, one way or another. When you ask the question, what is your budget? First of all, you know if you need to get the hell out if the answer is there is no budget, or if there's some that's when you know
it's $100. $100
may not be on the menu. But if you have a menu, you can say, well, within this range, I can offer X and Y. If you have a little bit more, you can get X, Y, and Z. It really helps objectify.
I'm sorry. Yo, the fervor that was inaudible. You ain't got no budget. No. And and I will say this, I have been approached, interestingly enough that you say this, Autumn, I've been approached by an institution, you know, to create new work. And it wasn't a commission, but it was new work. And I was like, all right, so what's your budget? Oh, you know, we don't really have any budget. Okay.
Unless there's a barter.
So it was just like, okay.
Unless there's a barter.
Right. So I was like, okay, so what would be the exchange? Because we're not using old works. You're specifically asking for something new. That to me doesn't even make any sense. And so they were like, well, we'll look into it. We'll look into it. 2 video chat calls later, I'm like, I'm already starting to develop my creative process for this work, and I'm still not being met with a contract, a number, or any of those things. And I'm just like, wait, hold up. By the 3rd call, the conversation was different. The conversation was then, listen, I have gotten to this point where I've shared ample information about my process. We can't go any further if there's no budget. It just can't happen. And then that literally opened up the door to like, okay, well, what do you then propose? Because when people say they don't have a budget, the reality is that they may not have a budget, but they still have access to another budget, especially if it's a larger institution. So there's ways to like pull money from here and pull money from there. I can honestly report back to everybody that Tasha was paid.
Yay! Great. That's excellent. That's an excellent answer to the story.
I did my market research.
Lena says, that's nuts. What's the name of the institution to avoid them at all costs? You got people asking for the receipts and the info.
Since I got paid, what I will offer, right, is that after the discourse, because you know what happens is that, oh man, okay. So branches of larger institutions that normally don't do art or just starting to do art say that they're unfamiliar around how that's supposed to particularly work, right? But what is clear for me is that you need to help impact the artist's livelihood. You know what I mean? Like what artists offer is beyond what we create with our hands. You know, creation literally is a full body experience. And it also is access to our intellectual property. You know, there's a whole abstract component to the creative process that doesn't even get valued in a particular type of way, you know? So what I will say is that I'm happy that in having that exchange with the institution, there was an epiphany and a realization that you can no longer ask an artist to create work if you're not going to offer them something. It's just not feasible.
And you know, that's what's so important about this whole fight for pay equity. When we stick up for ourselves, when we have the conversation that might seem uncomfortable, when we do create a way to talk about our salaries, we aren't just doing that for ourselves. It's an impact that we have on every creative that comes after us, either so that the institution or whoever the conversation has to be with, so they know they can't pull that shit with nobody else, or so that other creatives know, oh, this is what it looks like when I demand to be paid my worth. It's bigger than ourselves. It goes beyond us.
Absolutely.
Catalina says, that's so unprofessional on their part. Do you think they treated you that way because you are a freelancer?
It's a really good question. I think there is an inherent default within the art sector to undervalue artists, right? Especially if you are not maybe internationally known, despite the fact that you may have shown internationally. What was interesting about that conversation is that they found me because of my New York Times article. So it wasn't as if, and I think it's also very interesting when the institution invites you too. If you're inviting an artist, this is not even an open call. If you're inviting the artist, money should already be on the table, period. And that really just ties into what someone had asked as a listener. I think it's really poignant to what we're talking right now, is about transparency, right? I think it goes beyond just transparency about pay. It should be transparency around exhibitions, right? Because you'll find that some artists got paid, some artists didn't get paid. And to piggyback off of what Jalen offered, experience does count. However, there shouldn't be this huge disparity around who's getting paid what. You know what I mean? As someone who's coming into an exhibition, look, there's 10 people in the exhibition, you know, these notables that have been in the game 30 plus years, they got a little bit extra coin, right? But for y'all who are coming in, who are new, who are whatever the terminology they use nowadays, you are still of value. And so we're going to honor that with a minimum of XYZ.
Yes, yes. That's such a, thank you for sharing that experience so candidly. That's so important. I want to hop to a quick commercial that we have before we hop back in to our other responses and questions. We want to give a shout out to Freelancers Hub. Thank you, Freelancers Hub, for making programming like this, like Thou Art Pay Us, free and open to the public. Freelancers Hub is operated by Freelancers Union in partnership with the Made in New York Media Center and is a virtual community space designed to help freelancers thrive. So you can follow them for free educational workshops, legal and financial clinics, benefits assistance, and community events. Thank you, Freelancers Hub. And Jalen from Freelancers Hub is the one that keeps all of our tech going and keeps us on task. So thank you to you too, Jalen.
No problem,
Thanks,
no problem.
Jalen.
And just so everyone, for the listeners, just so they have a heads up, Freelancers Hub will be taking just a short hiatus from January to February. Pretty much we're trying to negotiate a contract with the city and trying to get more money. So essentially doing what we're talking about right now.
That's right. Write that menu, Jalen. Tell them Autumn Breon told you to write a menu of your services, okay, as to why we need the Freelancers Hub in NYC. You know what I mean? Like, this is such a dense cultural space of freelancers. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Write the menu. Okay.
Do you need testimonials, Jalen? That's what Carolina asked. You need some?
I mean, if you want to email one, that's fine. I could email it to our director and just like let them know of the good work we're doing and the happiness that we're bringing to our members and our audience. So that's fine. That's fine.
We got you back.
Cool. So we posed another question. This one was, what is the best advice that you've gotten about being paid your worth?
All right, y'all. Okay, let's get to the good stuff. All right. So this listener stated, about negotiating salary, it was really a journey based in knowing my worth. In the beginning of my career, I accepted any salary out of fear that I would miss out on an opportunity if I didn't take what was offered. Jalen, that's right. That's too familiar for many of us, right? Well, it gets better. Or that I'd be seen as a troublemaker or someone who challenged norms, and when I'd walk with a target on my back, and so I had to play nice.
Wow.
And it wasn't serving me. As I was navigating the field while really understanding my worth, my own self-worth, independent of these institutions, it became clear that I had to advocate for myself. I started relinquishing fear, being bold about what I needed. I started playing hardball and saying, no, I'm good. And then they'll call me back and say, on second thought, we can do that. And that was offered to us by Suhaili Bautista Carolina. Thank you, girl. You already know.
Wow. No, so honest.
It's like, how do you feel about that, Autumn? Because I know how I feel, and I'm having a visceral response, so I'm gonna let it tingle down a little bit.
Yeah, I think it speaks to so much to far too many of our experiences when we're just grateful to be in the room or happy to be asked. And I'm grateful that she was vulnerable enough to share that motivation behind saying yes and the FOMO that you think you have if you say no to something. But I'm also grateful that she was vulnerable and sharing that transformation that she got to really embody and stay in, and realize that sometimes it's okay to say no.
Yep.
Yeah.
I even wanna, the no is powerful. I've said before that no actually gives space for yes,
Mhm.
right? Thanks, bye. And next thing you know, a better opportunity that will serve you shows up. And you're like, okay, had I said yes to that, I wouldn't be available nor have the capacity to really show up for this newer opportunity.
Exactly.
But it also makes me think that, particularly about the arts, how this idea of FOMO is actually intentionally injected into the atmosphere.
Yes. That's the only way the whole industry can function. Scarcity and FOMO.
Right? That's the only way the exploitation continues to feed and perpetuate itself, right? If many of us were to create like these coalitions and this solidarity movements around pay, it's like, what? No, I'm not gonna do it. Like, imagine if we were to participate in exhibitions and find out that one of the artists in the show wasn't getting paid equitably,
Mhm.
and we were to be like, all right, so then this person doesn't get paid, we don't show our work.
Mhm. Mhm.
What
Yeah. And
message would that send?
I think in order for us to, as I think about scarcity and FOMO, they actually aren't separate, because FOMO is a function of scarcity. And for that banding together, it's exactly what the other listener talked about with what you're saying. Like, we have to have our own community where we can even have that honest conversation to make sure we're all being paid equitably. That environment cultivating that you're talking about, Tasha, is so important. And yeah, it's, we just have to make sure that we can be honest with each other, that we can ask these questions and have a space where you can ask an honest question and have an honest answer.
Okay, so someone had asked around FOMO, what does it mean? So FOMO is fear of missing out. You know, we have the YOLO, you only live once, but FOMO has definitely creeped up and definitely shown and reared its ugly head in many ways, where it's like it's actually paralyzing. It creates this paralysis where you just think like, what am I gonna do if I don't do this? So I really am appreciative and lift up Suhaili for, like you said, Autumn, bringing up that very vulnerable and honest conversation that one has with oneself around the decisions we make with regard to pay.
I like when she said being bold about what I needed. That's the thing, like, being paid a salary, being paid equitably, that's not a nice to have. That's a necessity. There's advice that you've given, Tasha. In an episode, you were saying, like, you just sat down and figured out, like, how much do I have to make just to stay afloat? Like, to break even, what do I have to make? I think that once you do that exercise, then you can go into any conversation so that you know what you have to be paid in order to have what you need.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with hubris or pride or being a troublemaker. You're just going in and saying, like, no, I have to be paid this much to stay alive. Again, it's just objectifying the conversation so that even if we feel like it's personal, it's a reminder that there's like simple mathematics behind it. You aren't making numbers up out of thin air. You know what you need to stay afloat.
And I'll just add this last thing, Autumn, because you bring up that exercise, but you know what else is very real about that exercise is finding out how much and for how long you've undervalued yourself.
Yeah.
It was really gut-wrenching when I finally was made abreast of that practice and seeing how I was shortchanging myself and for how long I was shortchanging myself, not only as an artist, but just as a human working in New York City. It was really like telling, like, what the, for me to make the same, let me just put this into perspective, y'all. I was working in 9 to 5 at an institution. This was outside of my art practice. And when I went on unemployment, the differential between what I was getting paid through the job with unemployment was $200.
And
I want people to like really, really sit with that. So imagine the time spent to get ready for work, the time spent for transportation, the time spent, the labor within the institution. And then to find out when I did the math and I would get unemployment, it was a $200 differential.
Wow. Yeah,
To be
I think
free.
the numbers like that, it being so
Yeah.
black and white, that can be blatant enough to have an understanding. Yeah.
Exactly.
well, that's even like now with like the pandemic unemployment assistance, where people are getting the extra money, where a lot of people are getting paid more on that than what they would if they went back to work.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, that brings up a good point. Like when you figure out what your rate is, what the bare minimum is that you can take, revisit that at least annually, so that you can make a cost of living adjustment. So if cost of living changes wherever you're located, adjust your rate if need be so that it can fit your cost of living. That's a really good practice too, that helps me.
So what's some other advice that some listeners have given us, Autumn?
Yeah, so the question again was, what's the best advice you've gotten about being paid your worth? This listener says, the best advice I ever received was, I think, from my own life experiences, and it is very simple. The worst that anyone can say is no. If you feel like you need or you deserve something and you say it out loud, it's interesting to hear who will say no. Is it your employer? Is it your partner? Is it your friend? When it comes to my employment, one thing that I mentioned to my boss a year ago actually was, you will promote me within a year, point blank. That was my directive to my actual boss. She never said no. And for me, that was a telltale sign for me to observe that my boss was actually in my corner. Not only did I make a declarative statement, I also backed it up with, this is what I want to have happen, but in order for you to allow that to happen, what do I need to do? You know, so it was more of a two-way street. But my declarative statement of this is what I want. And hearing that first initial response was, whether it was a yes or a no, that to me helped me determine my clear path and achieve what I wanted. Within a year's time of me making that statement, I was indeed promoted. So life definitely has taught me to just say how I feel and remember that no is the worst that I'll get back. I love that anecdote. That's a beautiful story.
I mean, what else is there to say? You know, no works in a very, why am I getting tongue tied today? You know, it must be the rum. You see, this is what happens. This is what happens.
Oh, that's what you're drinking today. We didn't hear what you're drinking. What do you have?
I have some rum with some frozen pineapple pieces, but see, this is what happens. You know, the rum does something to the tip of your tongue. You know what I mean? That's what it does. So what I was trying to say is that no offers up a bunch of different alternatives, right? So if someone says no, you can't go below where your starting point was. And then no sometimes gives you space for the next and upcoming yes. So,
I also think it's interesting in this listener's story that this conversation is when they realized that their boss was in their corner. I think it's so easy for us to have, bad experiences with collaborations or jobs or employers or coworkers that can leave you like kind of jaded and approach something with scarcity or absolutely assuming the worst. It's so easy for that to happen, like just for our emotions to become like callous kind of. But it's really cool that coming in with this statement, that's when this person realized like, oh shit, the person I'm working with is actually in my corner. Like, this is an ally that I have. I think that's so powerful. That's really useful. That's good to know for a working relationship.
I'm gonna bring Ada back into the conversation from the last episode. Deal with your trauma. Deal with your trauma. You know, it will show up in a multiplicity of ways. And sometimes you're actually carrying other people's trauma. You've heard stories, you've heard all these other things that really create, again, this wall that separates you from really activating your agency to boldly ask for the things that you need. So it's like deal with the trauma. And you know, just piggybacking off of that, someone had offered, they chose to be anonymous. Consider what the cost of your services are, double that, add some tax. Who's gonna tell you otherwise? I mean, at this point, it really is a say your own, you know, claim your worth. You know, I think I may have alluded to this or mentioned this in a previous episode, going to an art exhibition where they actually listed the prices of everybody's work and really seeing the vast differences between pricing. I'm talking about large works going for maybe $800, and then you have these small works going for like $2,500 plus. I was like, wait, you know, we're talking about assemblage, and I'm just thinking about like my own practice, like that took work. How is it, you know, there really isn't this baseline equation when it comes to the arts around, especially if you're outside of a medium of painting, you know, and some of the more traditional practices. You just gotta put a number on it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Another person, when they talked about figuring out their rate and pricing, she says, my friend's wife is a lawyer and she suggests asking for 30% more than you initially think to charge.
I don't know what to say. If it works, it works. I will say that what I struggle with is listening to what people say you're supposed to add into your equation for payment before you even get to that 30% extra. It's like, okay, how many shows have you done, right? What institutions did you do those shows with? Have you been in publications, right? Have you shown internationally? All of these things apparently are a part of the cauldron that's supposed to magically tell you how much you're supposed to get paid and how much you're supposed to get work. And sometimes that's been, I'm speaking from the eye, it's been really difficult for me sometimes in certain spaces, especially working with mixed media, to have like a fixed number, if that makes sense, right? So it's like, I just wanted to uplift the part of getting that base pay first before even getting to the 30%. So if you get that base pay, sure, add 30%. Because there's a lot of labor that's not even calculated in that process anyway. So you're not shortchanging yourself at all.
Yeah, I will say that I think this is where it's important to talk to your colleagues and also folks that make budgets, because unfortunately, it's also really easy to overprice. And that's something that can actually can hurt you. But if you can add the 30% or add whatever percentage and then double check that, use talking to your colleagues and talking to the people that prepare budgets to kind of confirm or verify, I think that's a great start. And, you know, all of these tips are actually really timely because coming to the end of the year, this is a great time, like if you're working on your taxes now, if you're trying to figure out like where you can make your charitable donations for your deductions, figuring out what your rate will be for the next year. This is a good time, just like in accounting, and to take a pause to reevaluate what you're charging and what your menu might be. So hopefully you all are using some of this and taking some of this loose change that you can use for yourself as we're wrapping up the quarter.
That's actually really helpful. Don't even start talking to me about tax preparation as an artist. That is a whole nother episode. okay? A whole nother episode. But I do want to say thank you for bringing up this idea of overpricing, because you have the other end of the spectrum with underpricing, right? For those who may not be familiar with one of my pieces, I created the American flag out of hair, chicken wire, and cotton balls, right? Y'all not ready for this story. There was like this whole event that was happening. We were like kind of challenging this other exhibition, whatever. We were out in the Bronx. And so one of the gallery spaces was like, come out here and show them who the real Bronx artists are and things like that. So I brought the work, I brought Justice to the space. I opened her up and everyone was like, wow, this is amazing, this is great. And the owner of the gallery comes up to me and was just like, oh, you know, this is amazing work, whatever. And they were just like, well, how much? And the first thing that they said was $5,000. Look at Autumn's face. Autumn's like, what now? Right. First of all,
and if you haven't seen this piece, by the way, this is something that we'll share that you can see in the post show notes, but you have to see the piece that Tasha's talking about.
So to give you some more context, the piece is 5 foot by 3 feet, 5 feet by 3 feet, and all made out of braided hair that I did myself, sewn to chicken wire, right? So this is what the FOMO is that Suhaili was talking about, not knowing when the next piece sell, like, you know, I thinking that in order to be defined as an artist, I have to sell work. You know, at that point, I didn't know this idea of not for sale for particular pieces. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I was like,
or keeping an artist proof for yourself, even if you make an edition, like a small edition size, to keep the AP for yourself.
Girl, I didn't know any of these things, right? So here I am being approached by a gallery owner, and the scarcity was visceral, right? But didn't know how to, it didn't register as scarcity. It registered as an opportunity. I'm gonna sell this art. And I'm like, $5,000, that's a lot of money. I'm gonna tell you right now, the look on the owner's face was as if they had just come across like a vintage, who's a big artist, like I don't even know, vintage piece from like 1976, like a Versace from like 1976 in a thrift shop, right? Knowing its worth value, and there was just like this look of disgust, really. He was like, you don't even know, like I can see it in his body, like she doesn't even know the value of the work that she's created. Mm-hmm. And it didn't even, well, obviously I didn't end up selling the work, but that was a gift to me and a learning lesson. My mentor was like, never discuss money in the instance. No, if someone wants to buy your work, give them your email information, and then you initiate that correspondence so that it's more business-like, okay? That was the first thing. You don't drop no dollars right then and there. It looks desperate. Yeah, she was very candid. She was like, that's desperate. But it was very true, and I just didn't know. So I was grateful that the person valued artists enough to not exploit me. And that's why I'm sharing that, right? Yeah. It was just like, this girl don't even know. She doesn't know the value of her work. And that's unfortunate. But thankfully he had integrity and decided not to exploit me.
Right, right. With that lesson that you were able to learn, thank goodness, in a safe environment where there weren't terrible consequences, it also sounds like you learned about like your own protocols and boundaries. So, hey, I do not discuss my work verbally and the purchase of it. You know, like you can use this email address and then we can correspond, or you can actually receive a catalog and then we'll be in touch. You know, like there are important boundaries like that just set precedents for how you carry out business, and that's important to think about. I think that's just as important as your rate. You know, what are the boundaries and protocols that you have in place that, again, just keep everything as objective and in a system as much as possible. Yes, yeah. What other? We got something from Toysha about the biggest lesson that she learned. What did she say? Absolutely.
That's right, Toysha.
Yes. Yes. There's a fantastic artist named Genesis Tremaine. I am a very, very big fan of her and her work. And at Basel last year, she was sitting on a panel, and when a question came up about pay equity, really, and what that means for artists, she was saying that she actually learned it from her grandmother. And there's this beautiful story that she told about when her grandmother would make a meal for the family or a cake, she would always cut out a little slice or save a piece of cornbread and set it aside. And she was saying, like, oh, you know, that's just my share. That's my share that I keep for myself. And that's what she uses as her framework for when she makes sure that she's paying herself first. Like, make sure that you pay yourself first. I like that so much. And that's a part of how you make your budget too. You know, you have to figure out, like, whatever your expenses are, what do you have to absolutely take care of first? So is it something towards your student loans, something towards your savings, something towards your small investments? Make sure you have all that taken care of. Like, that's your overhead. And then what do you have left?
I mean, I love the cornbread analogy, right? That feels very home. It feels very home.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
self is home. So I really, really like that a lot. But it just makes you, again, this illuminates for me how being vital parts of the art sector, we ignore ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And it's a double whammy if you're a Black woman. And you've been socialized to put everybody above yourself. You can be SOL. Yeah. That stands for shit out of luck, by the way.
It's like, oh, I'll take care of the person that's doing my makeup. I'll take care of the person that's doing my this. I'm taking care of the person that's going to get me here. But then when all the money has been allocated outward, you're left with zero. It's like, like you said, a double whammy. How is it that we've left ourselves out of the conversation when you're the one that's doing the work?
Yeah. So y'all think about cornbread and leaving a share for yourself as a mnemonic to remember, making sure that you pay yourself first, as Toysha Tucker said. Thank you, Toysha. Yeah, that is a really homey kind of feel that you get with that story. I imagine like the kitchen table in Carrie Mae Weems' kitchen table series. Like I imagine it being at like a table like that.
Yes. And just to think about like the stowing away, it kind of feels like sacred too. You know when you go to holiday dinners and I'll speak for myself. One of my cousins really makes Haitian macaroni like the bomb. It's like, let me get that Tupperware real quick. Get my little portion for the
right.
Stash that away. Jayla, you know what I'm talking about. You was talking about the meals over the holidays. I remember that.
On Thanksgiving.
Okay. I'm still waiting for my plate though. Don't think okay.
I may have ate it.
Okay. We're gonna talk about that offline. All right. But yeah, because it's valuable to me. Having that food on my tongue is valuable to me. What does it mean to stow away that cornbread because it's valuable to the person? I think that's a really beautiful analogy. I'm never gonna forget that. So thank you. Thanks, Genesis, too. We gotta bring up Genesis.
Yes. Thank you, Genesis Tremaine. So another question that we got from listeners was, what do you think about rate or fee transparency as a way to build solidarity and prevent scabbing among freelance cultural workers?
So, she's not Black, but I'm gonna uplift Michelle Miller Fisher's Google spreadsheet that came out May 2019. I don't know if y'all know about this spreadsheet. It went viral, damn near practically broke the internet. Created this spreadsheet where a lot of museum professionals anonymously put in their salary. And not just their salary, they also incorporated their benefits. Game changer. in addition to what literally came to me as I was preparing for this episode around transparency within exhibitions, she blew the roof off the house by talking about transparency around the piece. I definitely think it is important, but it's like, again, around the trust that you were talking about earlier, Autumn, who, we've been burned a lot, right? Let's talk about the realities. We've been burned a lot. And so we just don't know how to initiate the conversation around who do we talk to. So it really is, once we can chip away at that feeling, I think transparency really is going to take the needle around this conversation much further.
Yeah, yeah. I think we should also share the article about that spreadsheet in the post show notes. So those of you that didn't see Michelle Fisher's spreadsheet, you can at least check that out. It's very, very interesting. Again, the question was, what do you think about rate and fee transparency? So we'll share that spreadsheet and the article with you all. Something else that we got, another question. I'm fortunate to know a lot of freelancers who recommend me for gigs. So recently, these potential clients have been ghosting me once I send them my pricing, which is significantly lower than what I am making with my main gig with a small boutique marketing agency. It's discouraging because these are people I've spent time video chatting with, and they are not small businesses. I typically offer discounts to small businesses. Should I keep moving on, or should I take this as a sign that I need to lower my prices or offer clients even more flexibility? That's an interesting question. I think that you should take this as an opportunity to organize some kind of informal focus group around your pricing and just evaluate it. So the menu that I talked about earlier, if you don't have one already, consider creating that menu now so that instead of just sharing one rate, you can share a menu. But have a little informal focus group with some other freelancers, people that are doing the work that you are doing. But the gift is, since you're working at this boutique marketing agency, again, you're in the rooms where potentially budgets are created. So invite those deciders to a focus group as well. If you feel comfortable, just be honest, share what your pricing is that you've offered so far. If you need to create a menu, ask if they can help and use that to see if it's time to reevaluate or not. But take it as a lesson, take it as a learning lesson, and don't let yourself, feel too burned or take it too personally, but see what you can learn from it and try to tap on some of your colleagues.
I would say also the clients that are ghosting you, like even though you're giving a small discount as a small business, it could just be a sign that they're just going to be a crappy client, because some clients may have the money, but they may still not want to pay that amount. They want like the lowest type of like common denominator price. So yeah.
And at least she knows now instead of having to find out when she's already working on something with them that they're a crappy client. Yeah.
Jalen is basically saying no to that client. No. I'm just gonna piggyback up with the both of you. Sometimes how people respond to the conversation around payment is indicative of how they show up. And that will be moving forward. And it's just like, where do you want to exert your energy? Do you want to spend additional time chasing after somebody because they owe you money because you provided a service?
Right.
You know what I mean? Or do you want to be like, you know what? Having that introspective conversation, adding to what, bringing in what Autumn had offered around this focus group, that really then becomes a determinant of like how you move forward. Because what I do find is that sometimes artists will discount themselves to a deficit. Discount, and then a series of work, a body of work, the next piece is going to be let's say 20% more. And people are like, but I just paid whatever. You know what I mean? It doesn't serve you to discount yourself to the point where it harms you. So it's definitely a balancing act. But I feel that the focus group, as well as the gift of discernment, will help navigate that better.
Anytime something happens more than twice, there's some kind of pattern there. So it seems like you just have to sort out what the pattern is. But that's not a coincidence if it's happened that many times.
Like 2 times. Autumn was like 2 times. That's it. I feel that, I mean, I got a lot of loose change. I don't know about you, Autumn. I definitely was at the menu. I was writing stuff down. Much appreciated. I just want to say thank y'all, and I hope that we really were able to really expound on the questions, as well as the loose change that was offered. I feel like, how are you feeling? I'm feeling really good about this conversation.
Yeah. And remember, the rule with loose change, everybody, is that we keep it circulating. So please use all of these tips that we shared, our experiences that we shared, what our listeners were honest and so generous enough to share with us. Use this, test it out, and then share back how it works out for you and what ends up working out or not working when you practice it yourself. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Freelancers Hub. We hope to see you next week at the same time, 3 o'clock PST, 6 o'clock EST on Friday on the 18th. And this time it's going to be the season finale of Thou Art Pay Us, and it's called Coinlaboration.
I mean, this is it. Yes, thanks, Adirondie, but yes. And please don't let this be the end of the questions, right? We welcome your questions and your tips. Follow us on Thou Art Pay Us on Instagram. Follow Autumn on Instagram, follow me on Instagram, follow Freelancers Hub on Instagram as well. And we will continue to respond to the questions as they come in.
Thank you so much, Tasha and Autumn. We're always happy to have you. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. We hope everyone has a great weekend. You definitely will be receiving a recording of this event and any links from Tasha and Autumn that they'll send to me to forward to everyone. But yeah, definitely enjoy the weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, y'all. Next
time. Bye,
time,
everybody.
Better. Okay, y'all. I don't know. Just Lord. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Bye. Take care.